Hello, everybody, and welcome to Salesforce.org Architect Academy, where today we're going to be talking about social engagement with Smart Panda Labs. I'm Tom Leddy. I'm one of the directors on our Salesforce.org professional services team, and then Gokul and Shamir, if you want to introduce yourselves.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Gokul Seshadri. I am a customer success architect with advisory services. Happy to be talking to you once again. To you, Shamir.
Sure, I'm Shamir Duverseau. I'm a co-founder and managing director with Smart Panda Labs. We're a digital consulting firm.
All right, and I don't think we're going to talk too much about technology today specifically. This is more on the business-facing side and what you do before you actually implement your tools. But just in case we do bring anything specific up, just make sure you're not making any purchasing decisions based on anything we say here, and that you're only buying things that we already have for sale. Thank you to everybody for joining. These are great sessions. Thanks to Shamir also for joining as a guest.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. And I don't know, Gokul, if you want to talk about some of what we're going to cover on the agenda today.
Sure. We have been hearing about this topic for quite a while, basically from both higher eds and nonprofits in terms of how best to interact with their constituents or students via social channels. The number of social channels have become quite significant in the recent times, and the quality of engagement has also become more significant in the broader perspective of marketing engagement with of an institution with their constituents. So this space is evolving, and it's pretty complex, actually, given that there are a number of channels and so on. So we want to kind of set the stage on this topic with Shamir, who has extensive experience and kind of helps out charting this pathway for his customers. So today we will be discussing about the broad context of social engagement, why it has become important, what kind of impact the pandemic had on this area, and so on. And then we'll start laying down the lay of the land with the foundations and framework, how to really think through this, how to approach this, and so on. And we'll look at some strategies and considerations, and finally we also look at the tools. Specifically, we don't want to focus too much on tools, but rather we want to focus on how and why aspect of it, rather than take some tool and do something about it. With that, we welcome Shamir for this engagement. So Shamir, all yours.
Yeah, so I think you really set up the stage well. Social's become so big over the last several years, both in good ways and in bad ways. It's gotten good press, it's gotten bad press, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of news about some of the channels, especially around channels like Facebook, and what they're doing with data and what people are doing with Facebook data. But just to kind of simplify it, right, and set the stage, it's really all about just understanding the power of social advertising to get in front of people. And social advertising today is kind of, at least in my mind, it's what TV used to be, especially back in its heyday, probably in the 80s and 90s, really the heyday of TV. And you would think about wanting to get an audience in front of a certain show that was really popular in the day, whatever that show happened to be, Friends, and everyone wanted to get on Friends because you get this nice demographic of people who the networks watch that particular show. In the same sense today, social has all this data that we essentially are feeding into it by means of our activity, or that we're explicitly typing into it. So we're telling it, this is our age, and we're single, and we're married, or we're engaged, and we're giving all this information, which they're then pulling and saying, okay, great, I can pass this on to advertisers and say, okay, I want to target people between the ages of 18 and 25 who are engaged, and I want to show them this information about where to have their wedding, or about wedding photography, or whatever the case is. So it's really that ability to say, how do I hone down on the audience that I believe is most interested in my product or my service, and then serve them up that message in a way that's appealing to them. And again, it's not necessarily these people are actively looking. You're just saying they look like the kind of person that would be interested in my product or service, and I can target that. So and that's really the power of social. It's that data to say, you look like, Tom, you look like the kind of person who'd be interested in this.
Yep. And the interesting thing is, I remember when the whole idea of like social marketing first started coming to the forefront, and a lot of people were afraid of it because it's like, oh, you're taking my data and you're doing all this thing. And you're right, there's ways to misuse data, but you could say that about almost anything, that there's ways to misuse data. And at the end of the day, when you think about what TV advertising looked like 20 or 30 years ago, how many times did you just sit through a bunch of commercials that you didn't want to watch? Because, if you use Friends for an example, yeah, maybe Friends as a TV show apply, most of the people who watch it are in a specific demographic, but there's also a lot of people that aren't, right? And, I actually, to be honest with you, would rather see, if I'm going to have to look at an advertisement for something, I'd rather it be something that I actually am going to be interested in than just some blanket thing that people blasted out to as big of an audience as possible, and it probably might not even apply to me at all, right?
No, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One thing, Tom, based on what you said, the reality is the people on the marketing side who are trying to do this are significantly aged than the people who are actually engaged. So the youngsters know the inside out of social, right? They live and breathe this space. So they understand this space even better than the marketers. So we have an acute situation right now wherein the people who are actually serving or trying to serve this or take advantage of this are actually on a different segment than the people who are actually using it. 10 years from now, we will see, our sons and daughters grow up and do a much better social marketing.
It's true. Although you never know, 10 years from now, then there might be a whole other new set of channels. All right. So what about, there's a couple of buckets, it looks like. And, and obviously if somebody's searching for something versus whether they just kind of stumble across it. And, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, again, these are all high level thoughts, right? But just fundamentally speaking, you've got, active and passive in terms of what you're doing. So if I go into Google or some other search engine and I type in something I'm looking for that I'm looking to buy a new bike. I just bought a bike yesterday. So I'm looking to buy a bike. I'm typing in, I want a hybrid bike or a mountain bike or so forth. I am actively telling you, I am interested in this. I'm looking for this. Now, of course, you don't 100% I'm looking to buy one. I might be looking to repair one, or I might be looking to sell one, or whatever the case is. But I'm still actively telling you about my interest in this thing. On social, that's not happening, right? I'm not telling you this is what I'm interested in. I'm going through my feed. I'm looking at updates from friends, or I'm watching funny videos on TikTok, or whatever the case is. And then I happen to see an ad for something that's been targeted to me because of whatever information this particular social channel has about me. And they're guessing that, hey, you'll probably see this and be interested in it. So it's much more passive in that, like, I don't know, I'm just taking a really strong educated guess that this will be interesting to you and this will draw your attention, versus Google, where they have a much higher chance of knowing it because you explicitly told them, hey, mountain bikes. Okay, well, here's a bunch of ads for people who sell mountain bikes. So it's an interesting balance in terms of what they do. And, we're going to talk about it a little bit more later, I think, but just in terms of how that kind of feeds the overall funnel and that customer journey.
And when you think about an active search too, there's probably like adjacent companies. So like maybe I don't make bikes, but I make mountain bike accessories. So I make a rack that you can attach your bike to your car, or when you want to bring it somewhere. Yeah. I can still use that data to see, okay, who's been searching for mountain bikes? Let's show them an ad. Maybe they want this too. And maybe it's, I don't know how I know like Google and all these different search engines, they have different like structures for, how much you pay for your ads or anything. But, but it's still more likely that if I'm looking for bikes, there might be some accessories that I'm going to be looking at rather than just, somebody random person who isn't. And then, yeah, and on the passive side, like you said, if it's Instagram or TikTok or whatever platform, it's like they know what you're interested in just by the different posts that you're liking and interacting with. So so there is a good likelihood that you're gonna respond to certain ads over other ones.
Yeah. The other aspect here is if you're informing a search engine, or if you're expressing to a machine your intent, you are actually in the maturity curve. You have actually made up your mind about your need and things like that. It's very hard to influence at that level. But if you're thinking about it, or if I can make you to think about this product early on, there is a much better chance of success later on, to kind of get in front of your competitors and things like that. So that's where this becomes very interesting.
Yeah.
And if we think about this in the context of like higher ed, also, this is where somebody could start their search on Google because they're looking for a specific school that they want to apply to. But also then I know if somebody is searching for Harvard and I'm another Ivy League school, well then maybe I'm going to serve up ads because they might be interested in applying at my school too. And in the same vein, if they're looking for like state schools to apply to, maybe it's Illinois State University. Well, then maybe Western Illinois University or somebody that's in a similar system can then key off of that. And then I think that even kind of applies to social too, especially when you think about all of the like college sports teams and other like related activities that people might want to search for or they might go and like those on social media or follow those pages and things just because they're interested in potential like extracurricular activities if they do go to college. And then the next thing you know, then the college says, hey, look, this person's following, or it's probably not the college, it's probably like an algorithm behind the scenes that's doing it. But, so somebody identifies that, look, this person is, they just followed a bunch of pages about, my school's sports team, my school's, like their engineering department and whatever else, maybe we should start showing them some ads to see if they're actually interested in applying. Right?
Oh, for sure.
And then, what about, so getting started? So that kind of, that's like kind of talked about the what and, how you can kind of divide things up. But how do you actually get started with putting together a plan to do something like this?
Yeah, this is probably the most important part because, no matter what channels are out there, it all fundamentally starts in the same place. It's trying to figure out, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? Who's the audience for what we're trying to accomplish? Where can I reach that audience? And then how do I go about doing that? And it's when you kind of bring those things into alignment that you kind of say, okay, well, given this is the case, I should or shouldn't be on Facebook, or I should or shouldn't be on LinkedIn, or I should or shouldn't be on TikTok. It's not because, well, everyone's talking about TikTok, we should be running TikTok ads, or, that may or may not be the case. It's really important to take that step back and kind of say, well, what are the goals here and who are we talking to and so forth? And then does this channel make sense to accomplish that goal? Is this the best tool to use? If I'm going to build, go outside and build a shed, it's like, what's the right tool to do that? And it might be, I have this, great shiny new, brand new tool I bought, but if it's like, this isn't going to help me build this shed, then I'm not going to force my way to use it. I'm going to look for the best tool for the job. So we really have to kind of understand what's the job, what's the goal, what are we trying to accomplish? And then kind of say, of all this, this great audience of tools, what's the best tool for me to use to do that?
Yeah, a question here, Shamir, based on your experience, for higher ed institutions, who should actually do this exercise? Unfortunately, many of them are already into the social and now figuring out, right? Because it's very hard to, they are under market pressure. So many of them actually start off with different social channels, engagement, this and that, and then trying to get hold of these segments and understand better what they are trying to do. So who should typically own this in a higher ed institution?
I'll kind of answer that two ways. I'll kind of answer that the way that it kind of typically is, and then I'll answer that the way that I think it should be. So there's the way that it is, which is very kind of departmentally focused, right? And kind of saying, okay, am I interested in undergrad? Am I interested in MBA or EMBA or some other master's program? Is there some kind of executive education program I'm trying to promote, right? And whoever that kind of that product owner is, in the school for that is really going to take the lead and kind of saying, okay, who are the people in the marketplace that best fit my product, right? What does an undergrad student look like here at University of, ABC? Or what does this EMBA student look like at University of ABC? And then kind of saying, as the product owner, they're going to know that, right? Because they're the ones who have worked on to develop this product, this degree program. And they're the ones who are going to really understand that demographic and psychographic around who they're looking for. And I think starting with that and then coordinating with communications and marketing, then you're kind of beginning to kind of lay out the framework for saying, okay, this is the plan that we're trying to execute. And then of course you're going to refine it along the way. But that, I think that's really starts with that kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, that product owner. Now, the way I think it should be does involve that, certainly to a degree, but I really feel like it should start on a higher institutional level. I believe that sometimes schools so fragment themselves that they forget the fact that when I see, ABC University, that's all I'm thinking. I'm not thinking this university is divided into 12 different departments. And at times those departments are essentially competing against each other. I'm not thinking that. I'm just thinking this is ABC University. So I really strongly believe there should be a holistic institutional strategy to communicate, and then to say, great, now that we've kind of got you kind of in our bubble of this institution, let's figure out which program is the best for you based on where you are. Are you this, 17 or 18-year-old senior? Okay, well, then you're an undergrad. Are you this, 45-year-old professional? Then maybe you're an EMBA or executive education. Like, let's first kind of say how do we kind of show them the power of ABC, because that's what they're thinking about. And then kind of say, okay, great. Once we've kind of got them in that fold, how do we kind of push them toward the product or service within ABC that best serves the needs of the institution globally and not just kind of like departmentally?
I think it's a really good point. And I think some schools they're moving more in that direction, but I think there's still a little ways to go. And I think to your point, if I think back to when I was in college, certainly when I applied, I didn't really think about what the department structure of the school was like. I just knew I wanted a specific degree and I wanted it from, this school that I was interested in applying to, right? Like whether or not I was specifically going to be working with, the business school or the engineering school or whatever college I was going to, it was more the name of the university that held all the weight for me. And I'd be willing to say even throughout my entire career as a student, I never really gave any of that much thought. I mean, it's the people that care about that the most are the people that are the internal staff within the school that are actually parts of those departments, and they're trying to figure out how they can, how they can get the most value out of their specific programs. But it is kind of to everybody's benefit to take a step back and take like kind of a holistic approach and think about like, there's nothing wrong with marketing at the department level and adding some additional information on top of what's what's already being shared out at the overall institution level. But there is a lot to be said for your school itself has a pretty strong brand, and you should be taking advantage of that to try and draw people to whatever major they're interested in, really.
Exactly. And I mean, to me, again, this is super generalizing, but schools kind of fall in those two buckets, right? You have these schools that have these really strong brands and they spend a lot of time and energy and money to really strengthen those brands so that when someone hears the name, Stanford, when someone hears the name, MIT, that means something, right? That immediately has a connotation to it and that means something. And then you have these other schools that are kind of, nipping at their heels, so to speak, that are like, hey, we don't have that brand and we're probably not going to be able to build it and develop it. So we're going to try to do these other things as smartly as possible to kind of counteract against that, right? So if digital is where it all ends up, which we all know it is, because that's the world we live in today, then if you have one of those strong brands, it's to your advantage to say, how do we maximize that? Not just from a pure play branding standpoint, but how do we take that into the digital experience and how do we continue to maximize that? and kind of pull, those people all the way through and build the lifetime value of that person so that they're looking at us, not just from an undergrad standpoint, but from a master standpoint or a PhD standpoint, executive education standpoint, all those kinds of things. How do you continue to maximize that as these other brands are not as strong from a brand standpoint, but doing a lot better from a digital experience standpoint to say, hey, look, we're going to have this nice cohesive experience that we're going to use to kind of bring you to the fold with us. And that's a constant, battle that we've kind of seen developing, especially over these last, maybe 5 years or so.
It also seems like it's becoming more and more important. Like the concept of like a lifelong learner is something that we've been hearing about a lot more, where maybe 20 years ago, you went to school, you got your bachelor's degree, and then, maybe you went back and got a master's, but then you were kind of done, right? And now things are changing so fast in every industry that the only way you're going to be able to keep up is to continue learning, throughout your life. And, that's why we're seeing like these executive and professional education type programs growing a lot bigger. And it's also why we're seeing schools try to take the exact approach that you're saying of let's see what we can do to, we want to make sure people are aware of all of the great programs we have available right when they're getting ready, before they even leave high school. So they're thinking about coming to school here. But then over time, we know there's going to be shifts in their career. There's going to be new concepts they're going to need to learn about. And what can we offer from a graduate level or even a postgraduate level that's still going to be valuable for them so that they can stick with us for the duration of their career too. And one of the other things that stands out to me about this slide in particular is identify your tools is the last thing. And we have seen people take the opposite approach so many times that in fact, one of the funny things, Gokul and I we mentioned this earlier. We've done a bunch of other videos on tools like Marketing Cloud and what the tools themselves are capable of and how you can implement it and everything. But if you just try to go in blindly and start standing up tools and hoping that you can come up with your strategy as you go along, you're just not going to be successful if you don't do these other three things first, right?
Yeah, I mean, you go to Home Depot and you buy this great great saw, this great bandsaw, and you buy this this great sander and this super high tech drill, and man, I got this hammer, and I got these great tools, and it's like, okay, well, great, well, what are you going to build? I'm going to build a car. I was like, well, I mean, you may kind of be able to bumble into that, but if you knew you're going to build a car, maybe you should have used that as the driver for what where you're going to go shop and what you're going to buy there. And that's of course, an exaggeration, but, sometimes we get caught in that cycle of, oh, this tool is great. It has so many great, functions. It can do all these great things. And it's just like, but you haven't stopped to ask yourself, to your point, Tom, like, well, what is it that you're trying to do?
Yeah.
And then letting that lead to the decision of what tool actually fills that need. So,
right. And more than likely, it's probably going to be more than one tool also, right? Especially if the more channels you're communicating through, the more combination of tools you need. And then that gets into another discussion. Well, how do those tools all work together? And you can make sure that your messaging is consistent. But to your point, you're not even going to be ready to have a conversation like that if you don't even know what your goals are in the first place, and who you're trying to communicate to. And like you said, if I'm advertising a professional education, like post-degree certificate type program, probably I'm going to want to look at like LinkedIn as a channel, and maybe Facebook. Is it going to be TikTok? Yeah, I don't know about that. So and to your point, the ago, kind of this we just have to be on every channel, and every time there'd be a new social media platform that would come out, it was like a new shiny thing that like we have to get our content out here. We need a presence on this channel. And I actually used to work at a consumer goods company that took that strategy of, we just need to get our products in front of as many people as possible, as many ways. And there were some lessons learned from that the amount of money that you're spending to advertise on a channel that your audience doesn't, subscribe to, you're never going to get any ROI from something like that. So, right. So, yeah, and kind of like we said, what about these different stages? I know each one kind of has its own goals and processes and everything, but we talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, for sure. That's just knowing, kind of people and where we are in the decision-making process, especially a more considered purchase, like, for example, higher education, which, it's the way I always talk about a considered purchase, that something with greater financial and emotional risk is it's something that if you make the wrong choice, you can't take it back. I can't return it to the store, right? Like if you pick a school and you start spending the money to, for this, master's program, whatever the case is, like I can't get that money back. Like I have made my decision, I've invested in this, right? So that journey by its nature is going to be a little longer and more complicated because you want to make sure you make the best choice. So, when you're in that awareness phase and you're just trying to, on a very, very high level, maybe not even showing any interest yet at this point, but you're just kind of getting a sense of what is in the marketplace. Well, social is great for that because again, I'm showing you a product or service that I think, makes sense for you based on what I know about you, right? And at that point, again, to use whatever, undergrad as an example, if that's the case and you're at that phase in the process, it's not like, hey, apply today. Like that's a bit too much. I'm just like, maybe I'm a junior or a sophomore, in high school. And it's like, I'm not even thinking about quite applying yet. Like I'm still got a few years left and, I still got to take my SAT or whatever the case is. But, it's great to know that I am thinking about engineering. And it's great to know that whatever school has a great engineering program. So at best, if I can download something on the program, if I can maybe watch a video that kind of gives an overview of the engineering program for the school, that level of engagement, that's a reasonable goal for that awareness stage. And then as I maybe become a junior and become a senior, and now it's like, okay, this is the beginning of my senior year, this is becoming serious. Now, as I get into consideration stage, maybe the best goal is just to get me to subscribe, get me to sign up for an email so I can start getting consistent information about what's happening with the school. And then as I get to a decision, now I get to the point where it's like, okay, are you ready to apply? So those goals matter, right? And kind of where you are. And then that makes you think, well, then what's the best way to position myself from a channel standpoint based on where they are? And again, when you're in awareness and consideration, social is great. It's a beautiful fit for that from a direct marketing standpoint, because I'm just trying to get you aware, right? I'm trying to get you to learn. As you get deeper in, search from a direct marketing standpoint, there's more intent. Or if I'm going to use social, maybe, retargeting and kind of getting someone who's already had some level of engagement and getting them back. Now, all of a sudden, how you're using the channels and what channels you're using are shifting just based on where the people are and what makes the most sense based on that stage.
This actually, it's funny, it resonates with me a lot too, because my daughter is a junior in high school right now. And actually Gokul has a son that's about the same age. And okay. I can tell you, last year she started getting, kind of like a trickle of communications. I mean, she was a sophomore and she would see things come up and, she's scrolling through Instagram or whatever. And now that she's taken like some standardized tests and, when you take like the SAT now, when you finish it, it asks you like what specific schools you want to send your results to. And if you are, and you do like a survey about what your interests are and everything. And, she's leaning towards more of like a creative type major. So she's starting to get a lot more targeted ads and even things that are coming in the mail or emails and everything that are, for like art schools and things that more align with her interests. And like to your point, she's still not at the point where she's a senior yet. So I think we'll see, even different emails coming through next year. But now that it's close to the end of her junior year, she's starting to get a lot of requests for, why don't you come do a tour of our school, or a lot of them are virtual tours right now. But it's interesting to see that exact progression that you've described too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One question, Shamir. If you do not know much about the constituent, purely based on their social behavior, would it be possible to analyze and understand at what stage they are in based on their social interaction? How should the institutions approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree, I mean, I think you can. I mean, I think, a lot of it's going to be, about testing kind of what you think are the triggers and what makes sense. But I think in looking at some of the data you have, so sometimes you explicitly know the age or the age group of the person, and that can certainly help a lot. But sometimes you kind of implicitly know that. So again, maybe some of the things that they're following or some of the things they're liking are kind of letting you know, where they are in that process and how deep they are in that process. So, someone who's maybe, following something or, perusing a lot of information that has to do with SAT prep, might be a lot different than someone who is kind of explicitly starting to follow specific schools, right? So just kind of getting a feel for that, right? And then you're kind of just at that point, you're kind of just guessing, as to where they are. But a lot of times their actions, their behaviors will tell you too. So, if you can get them to come to the site, what calls to action are working. So maybe you're A/B testing a couple of ads, and one ad is to watch a video, and another ad maybe is to do something a little bit more explicit, like subscribe or request more information, or to Tom's point, schedule a virtual tour, right? When you're testing those, like which one that student chooses, you're able to say, okay, well, this person A chose this one, this person B chose this one. And then you can kind of make some assumptions and say, well, they might do that because they're a different step in the process. And now from this point forward, there's obviously technology out there that can say, I'm now going to treat this person differently than this one because, I'm kind of put them on different paths based on where they kind of are implicitly telling me where they are in the process. So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of make educated guesses and hypotheses around that, and then kind of test that and see how that works out. And the more interaction they get, the more you get them to interact, the more information they're giving you, and the more it's refining that. And of course, now with the with AI in the mix as well, that becomes even more powerful, right? Because the more people that are doing it, the more it's learning and kind of making those assumptions as well. So.
And I am trying to overlay this concept with something you spoke about in the previous slide about an institution approaching their students as a whole instead of this departmental individualized engagement. Because now, if it is a fractured engagement, one school or one department might know that this student is in a consideration stage, whereas the others might be approaching them in awareness stage, and this whole matrix kind of breaks down, right? It becomes very confusing.
Yeah, it's also an interesting use case for A/B testing that I hadn't thought of before, is that you can actually use it to kind of segment people differently based on how they respond to the specific ads that you're showing them or the specific pages or whatever. Because I'd always thought of it as, here's a way to refine our marketing strategy. So maybe we show 10% of the people who come to our website see this version of this page, and the other, another 10% see this version, and then whichever one interacts with it more, then that'll become the final, version that we display. But it's interesting to hear that you can actually do it. There's other uses for it besides just that. So
I was just going to say, I think, A/B testing is really powerful in terms of kind of breaking down those segments. Gokul had kind of, you were mentioning, and kind of saying how exactly do we best refine these segments and make these determinations? Because again, we are making hypotheses, right? We're making these educated guesses. So then how do we design an experimentation program that kind of tests out these guesses and kind of, allow us to refine that?
Yeah. What I was trying to say was looking and thinking more about these broad categories. I think in terms of personalization, people just experiment, right? Let's show up 2 different blocks or 2 different images and things like that. Instead of really trying to categorize a student and then trying to make that personalization, I think it's very important for the institution to exactly understand which stage a student is, and then they should be able to, that data should trickle down to each of the emails or messages that are going around. I haven't seen that level of sophistication with the customers I have worked with.
Yeah, I think that goes again back to our previous slide, right? It's like you have to lay down the foundation and framework to even be able to get to the point of doing that, right? Like you have to kind of lay down the processes, you have to lay down the technology, the integrations, the data capture and analysis, and then you can begin to kind of start that process and start to kind of figure that stuff out. But oftentimes it's such a challenge just to get that foundation in place and the framework in place. And then you think, well, this technology, this will solve it all. If I do this, this will allow me to do all these things. And it's like, well, there's still a lot of foundational work that needs to be done, even with the technology, to be able to get to the point where you can do that.
Exactly. Yeah, the technology will allow you to do that, exactly what you said, but you have to still do it and figure out what it is that you're trying to do. So I think this is a little bit more detail about what we were kind of talking about on the last slide too, about just what kind of messages you're sending at each stage, and how much information you know about everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So like you said, in the awareness stage, it is kind of that initial messaging, like, hey, here's something about my organization, products, institution, whatever it is that we think you might want to know. I don't know that much about you, but I know enough. I have enough data points that I can reasonably say that you're probably going to be interested in this. And then it looks like really the goal there, it's like the goal of each of these stages is mainly just to move to the next stage, right? So, like I want to make sure you're aware of this, and then I want you to think about it and put some thought into whether this is something that might be right for you, right? And then interesting though, so consideration, we reiterate the initial message and then kind of enhance it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're kind of in the awareness with the initial message, you're trying to figure out kind of, for lack of a better example, it's like fishing, right? You're trying to figure out what the right bait is, right? Like what is it that attracts them here? So again, going back to higher education, is it our athletics that's attractive to them? Is it our engineering program that's attractive to them? Is it our location that's attractive to them? What is it that's kind of like pushing the button of this person, or maybe multiple things that's pushing the button of this person to kind of say, oh, I really love to go to school in California. I really, it's really important to me to go to school with a great athletics program, where the case may be. And then if that's kind of, the ad or whatever that kind of drew the activity and engagement, then let's play on that. Like if the fact that we're in California really matters to them, let's play on the fact that we're in California. If the fact that we have an award-winning engineering program really matters to them, let's play up on that, right? And let's pull them back in based on that, and continue to kind of develop that, and of course expand and show them, hey, there's other great things too, but let's choose the right bait and kind of lure them in and kind of say, hey, look, this isn't, you've implicitly told us this is important to you. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about the engineering program to really get you, kind of engaged and kind of pull you in. So,
and the other thing I noticed too that separates kind of the consideration phase from the awareness phase is the consideration phase also includes a specific call to action that doesn't necessarily mean apply now, like like we said earlier, but it could be join our mailing list, come and check out our campus, come and but it's you're actually asking them to do something so that you can kind of verify their interest, number one, and then even get even better messaging out to them beyond just sending them ads, basically, right?
Yep.
Yeah. In fact, business needs to make decision on what represents a consideration stage. That's going to be very critical, right? You put me on awareness because that's the initial bucket, but what kind of interaction should I make to be to mature into the next level and next level? I think those are key data attributes and key behavioral attributes. And unfortunately, I think the channel itself may not provide you this. Channel might say, I am so and so age, I am looking for this and that. It's like very broad demographic and other attributes. It doesn't actually help me. The channel, the raw channel data or raw channel segmentation, I'm realizing that doesn't help me to actually put a student on one of these buckets.
Now, I mean, one of the things that we kind of get in our soapbox about that we run into across multiple industries is, as marketers, sometimes we fall back on this sense that like advertising is the answer. Like the answer to every question is advertising. And, if there's a problem, then we need to spend more money on advertising, and we need to diverse advertising, or we need to advertise here. And, we forget the fact that, someone interacts with an ad, whether it's a paid search ad or a social ad or anything, for mere seconds. I mean, it's mere seconds that they're reading the ad and deciding, do I want to click on this thing? But once they click, the majority of the time that they're engaging with you is post-click. It's with the landing page, it's with the website, it's with the web app, or whatever it is that you're kind of driving them to. And oftentimes we don't spend time and attention understanding and measuring that engagement or improving that experience or trying to improve that conversion funnel. We spend all our time and attention and money on the advertising. But it's like you're spending your money on the place where the people spend the least amount of time. And it's not where they make the decision. Like, they're making the decision once they get to your website and they go through your process. So spend it there. It's kind of that imbalance that we often see, and it's one that we're trying to get around. And the progressive brands are certainly doing that across the board, or getting around that. But a lot of times, other industries are kind of slow to adopt that and kind of understand that and say, this is where we need to spend our time and attention in terms of measurement, because this is what's teaching us something. It's after they click on the ad that we're really starting to learn about them, right? So I definitely agree that that's the case.
That's an excellent point, Shamir. Actually, at the moment of clicking, you do know something about this interest rate. Maybe you know a lot more, but often this is not being used in redirecting the students to the right web page or right content. You're right. It all goes back to one generic content. And the interest that was generated with the ad, with all the attention, with all the marketing effort we did, kind of lost, or the momentum is lost, right? Or it's an opportunity lost. If you were to, you're almost like segmenting me and then putting me once again in a generic bucket, right?
Yep.
Instead of more targeted content, not only at the digital channel, social channel level, but my eventual, like what you said, where am I? I'm looking for some information. Give me the information I need. Don't make me search all over again, right?
Exactly.
That's where concepts like experience design and just design thinking in general kind of come into, like, what is the true end-to-end experience I want somebody to have when they're dealing with my organization, institution, and it's like I said, advertising is it's like the doorway, right? You build this really nice looking door with a beautiful frame, and and the door has like a really cool logo on it and everything. But you still have to, once the person actually says, okay, now I'm going to open the door and go inside, you better have something nice behind that doorway too for them to do, or else they're going to lose interest pretty quickly. So, so it is that whole, let's make sure that we're, number one, providing a consistent experience, kind of like Gokul said. We don't want them to, they're really well targeted advertising, and then they come to a generic website that they just have to figure things out again. But also it should be, messaging should be targeted to them. By the time they get to the point where they're applying, we know what you want to apply for and why you want to apply for, and we're going to give you a personalized experience based on that. And then I think that makes the decision stage, which is kind of the fourth box here, even easier, because you can add this additional sense of urgency of, make sure you apply by this date. We only have so many positions open, or your deadline for getting financial aid is going to approach if you don't apply by this date or whatever. That if you're not providing that really good experience across the board, you're going to come across probably as pushy when you get to that stage. But if you get to the point where every touch point that someone's had with your institution up to the point where they've applied has been this amazing personalized journey, now when you say, hey, you know what, we only have like 8 slots left in our program, you better hurry up and apply, they're going to be much more likely to be like, I do want to do this. So
100%.
And this is where sometimes things also get dicey, because I can do all I can on the digital ads front and spend all the money segmenting, but I have very little control over this website and things like that. Now we are talking about multiple departments, right? Then there is a global website which hasn't been refreshed, or which takes 20 different people, to put up a new page, and practical difficulties, right? Because there is branding, there is coloring, and so on. So it becomes very complicated if we were to do more targeted pages as destinations for these ads, social engagements.
Yeah, And I was to say that's where the foundation and framework come into play, right? Because I mean, if you think some of these things through at the beginning, then at least you can say, okay, what are the needs and how many people have these needs, how many departments and so forth. Then at least you can say, okay, great. Given that's the case, what's the right technology to help us do this, right? Because there are tools that will help you to dynamically change a page or dynamically change a site based on certain parameters so that you don't have to, go through this process every single time to do that. We can kind of think it through and create a structure that at least to some degree that takes, key components and says, well, let's change this module here, this module there, or this masthead or whatever, based on what information this person's telling us based on their behavior. And at least if the structure is there to do that, and that, the strategies are laid out to do that, then at least you can start to create that more custom experience, maybe not one-on-one experience, but certainly, segment-wise to say, hey, this is more of a EMBA person versus this is more of an executive education person versus this is more of an undergrad. And how are we going to shift the experience based on kind of these key segments that are important to us as an institution?
It's also a good case for why you need to make sure that there aren't any silos between your marketing team and your web design team and all the different teams that are responsible for all these different steps, that they have a similar goal and mission and that they're all aligned on it too.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have also noticed that talking about these target pages, those have come a long way, like at least 5 years, if not sometimes 10 years, right? They have an evolution. And many of these websites are assuming static pages and there is not a lot of dynamism. So even if I were to supply a set of parameters from the social ad or the digital ad, the consumer who is a website who should change the content, they are not ready because those are slightly older technologies. Have you seen that, Shamir? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been a huge problem is, you have these old, sometimes legacy technologies that are in place and they're very difficult to change. They're very costly to change. Sometimes, groups just don't want to make the investment in changing it, which we understand and makes sense. And, it limits you and it limits the experience that you're able to bring. And I think the cycle that just industries across the board get caught up in, especially some of the, these older legacy industries it's like, well, we don't want to spend the kind of money it's going to take to kind of redo this infrastructure. And it's like, well, you're going to be spending it anyway, whether it's today or in 3 years or in 5 years, I guarantee you're going to be spending the money. And the longer you wait, the more expensive and more complicated it's going to get. So, maybe if you start trying to, think to get ahead of this, you're putting yourself in a much better position than if you kind of, push it off to the side and delay the inevitable. You limit your ability to, to be able to flex and grow and mature your digital experience, and you're making things more costly for yourself. So, you kind of have to really weigh that the cost versus benefit there and kind of say, okay, let's at least start an iterative process of starting to kind of move into new technologies. So at least we're moving in the right direction versus kind of just getting stuck in the mud of, well, I have this legacy and I don't want to spend the money and it's too expensive. And then, all you're doing is driving up your costs. You're lowering your ability to perform and grow and mature. And eventually that's going to catch up to you in some way, form, or fashion. At least that's what we've seen.
This is a great segue from all the other things we've been talking about. It's just the idea that you're not going to just build all this out one time, and things are constantly changing. People's interests are changing, organizations are changing, marketplaces are changing. So, you have to do this, and it's kind of this cycle of you build something, you measure, you learn from it, you tweak it, and you keep kind of keep going. Yeah. Oh
yeah, for sure. It's the classic lean methodology, and of course, not every organization is going to be lean. Most of us aren't going to be lean, but the principles can all certainly apply, right? Of kind of saying, hey, let's measure what's happening, let's learn from it, and then let's iterate and move forward. And so often when we do spend the money and we do put things in place and we kind of establish this structure, we think, okay, I've done it. I'm good. Now the stuff's going to start flowing in, applications or whatever are going to start flowing in, and it's all good. And, the world changes, as we saw in the last year, like that, it snuck up on us so quickly, so fast. And, between probably just the beginning of March and the end of March, how much change did we see in that 1 month of March, 2020? from March 1st to March 30th or 31st. It was a huge amount of change in terms of where the world went. So having the technology and having the processes in place to be able to pivot and kind of say, hey, let's try something new is going to be critical versus having to turn this huge, ship, which is just near impossible to do with any kind of speed. So experimentation just becomes so key of being able to say, how are we constantly looking to change based on, as Tom said, the market, based on what our customers are doing, based on what competitors are doing, and measure that and continue to tweak and evolve that.
Yeah, and obviously the pandemic is the biggest example we have in recent times. But even when you think about when we're thinking about educational institutions, right now we're talking about social media, and 20 years ago, social media marketer was not even a job, right? Like it wasn't something that you got taught in school, and nobody knew that it was going to be as important as it was even in the early days of MySpace or whatever the real early social channels were. And it's so schools have had to even adapt their curriculum to make sure that students that are entering school now are ready for careers like that. And to your point, if somebody had built something 15 years ago and they built some static site with a bunch of static web pages on it that doesn't even talk about that they even have a program like that, and now the only way to add it in is to go and edit the raw HTML and upload some images or something, that's going to be a pretty tough time for that school. Even and the sad thing about it is they might even have really good content that they can share, but they don't have any way of letting anyone know about it. And so then it just kind of goes unnoticed, and it ends up affecting enrollment numbers.
Yep.
And then lastly, we had just kind of executing on your tactics and thinking about your audience demographics.
Yeah, and I think, I can't remember who it was, but one of you made a great point, in the beginning, just about, what's the right tool for the right audience that, who you're talking to. I think, Tom, it was you. It's like if you're trying to talk to professionals and you're trying to get them to this executive education program or an EMBA, TikTok might not be the right channel for that, right? I mean, it's not to say those people aren't on TikTok, and it's not to say that, there's any harm in experimenting on that, but you're certainly not going to kind of be like, hey, let's take a chunk of our budget and put it in that channel. You're going to see what makes sense for you, right? So it's really about thinking through what makes the most sense. It's really about kind of saying, here's our baseline, and then here's where we're going to kind of experiment and kind of see what else may be working for us in ways that perhaps we didn't expect. You guys both know that often the results of experimentation are counterintuitive. It's like, this is exactly the opposite of what I would have thought would have happened. So, we're all about experimenting, because all we're doing here is we're just talking about best practice, right? Just general directional best practice. But every brand out there, every school out there, every organization should experiment, because there's exceptions to every rule. And the only way you can really effectively learn is to measurably see, hey, this is an exception. The data is telling us this is an exception to the rule, as opposed to what my gut's telling me or what idea someone had in the shower that morning or something like that. We have the ability to have data, right? And that's where social and all these other digital channels come into play. We have so much more data than we had 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's about how are we creating a process to leverage it and use it in the right way to make objective decisions that have measurable results.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, interesting about experimentation too, I can tell you that I've done this with my own, social media and things, where you'll post something that you are so sure is going to get a certain amount of engagement, and it just doesn't, right? And you can go back later and kind of analyze things, and then it's like hindsight's always 20/20, and you're like, all right, now I get why this didn't work. But the only way you really know that is through that experimentation, and then the ability to be kind of nimble and flexible and course correct really quickly when you say, okay, you know what, this isn't working the way we thought it was going to be. How about this? You can go back and do all the analysis later to figure out why it didn't work, but the point is it's not working. So let's move on to something that will, and then we can work on that going forward and use it to refine our strategy and learn from it. So. So yeah, thank you. This was great. Thanks, Shamir, for joining, and thanks. If you're interested in checking out any more content, we've got our Trailhead live sessions. We've got our YouTube channel, the Architect Academy group, and the Power of Us Hub. We will share this this deck, and then also if you're interested in our printed content, you can check out the Salesforce Architects blog. Other than that, if you're interested in any additional content, let Gokul and I know anytime. And with that, yeah, thanks. Thanks to Shamir. This was amazing, and you had great insight. And yeah, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you guys for having me both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.